All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychic Perspectives. I am Carol, and this is the lovely Sarah. We are
Hello.
both psychic mediums and paranormal investigators. And this is episode 3 on our 4-part series of the clairs or the psychic senses. So thanks for joining us. And today we are doing clairsentience, which is clair feeling.
Yes.
Sarah said, "Oh, this is a big topic, right?"
Yeah, no, I'm definitely learning actually more as I'm trying to explain it, which is the beautiful part of teaching.
That's exactly right. You learn from teaching. So because it
Yeah.
really makes you analyze things for yourself. But so if you've been
Yeah.
watching the series, or if you haven't been watching the series, rather go back and take a look. We've already done the clear seeing and the clear hearing. And so there's their own episodes. And then I can also tell that people are really utilizing the show notes. And I do my best to make those show notes as, as specific as we can make them for everybody. So you can kind of go and look at those areas that are really of interest to you. But we get such a dialogue going on that I do encourage people to actually, if you have time, while you're washing the dishes or doing something extra, just listen to what we're saying as well, because there's a lot of information in there. So,
Right.
all right. So we're going to get going with clairsentience and the clair feeling, and we're going to start off with what it looks like and what it feels like. So I'm going to let you get started. So what were your thoughts? Because you said before we got started here, you're like, oh man, clairsentience is kind of confusing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So when we were talking about it before and we were saying, oh, the difference between being an empath and having clairsentience. And I was like, oh, that there's a difference. Like I didn't really realize that. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't understand what clairsentience was exactly. So I'm kind of having a hard time, I guess, differentiating between what is an empath then and what does clairsentience mean? Because to me, it's kind of the same thing, even though there are different types of empaths um, and what that means to me is just that you would be kind of absorbing the energies of these outside sources. Like if you're a nature empath, for example, um, that's where you would go to, rejuvenate yourself because you're absorbing, the good energies of nature and it's revitalizing and all these things. Or animals can be very healing, or, it can also have an adverse effect when you're in a large crowd
Right.
and you're absorbing all of the crowd's energies. And so there's a fine line, I guess. I don't know. Maybe
Well, I
you
do
should.
think you're right. And it's a big topic, and empathic comes up when we're talking about clairsentience, because I agree with you. I think that the point of an empath is that you spelled it out really well. It's just being extremely sensitive to that type of information, and it comes in the form of feeling. Um,
Right.
so, I mean, I don't see a separation with that either. I think you're right that they're the same. The question is what are you picking up on? Are you picking up on emotions? Are you picking up on the energy? Are you picking up on physical sensations? And that's why I think
Right.
clairsentience is so kind of convoluted and confusing. It's because there's a lot to it, which is why I wanted to talk about what does it look like and what it feels like, because hearing's pretty simple. It's a thought or a sound, right?
Right.
Seeing's pretty simple. It's a visual with your eyes or in your mind. Those are
Right.
really simple, but clairsentience gets really confusing. Um, so I had broken those down for ease of understanding, hopefully for people that are watching. Their emotions, impressions, and sensations, right? I mean, but those are really big: emotions, impressions, and sensations. Now, where those come from, like you said, they could come from a crowd, another person, they can come from spirit, they can come from nature. Are you
Right.
picking up the emotions of another person? Are you sensing their energy? Are you feeling their body? So it gets really confusing, but it's either an emotion, an impression, or a sensation.
Right. I think
So,
the biggest applicable situation for me when it comes to clairsentience is when I guess you feel or maybe you're feeling what's contrary to what's being shown. Meaning, when you ask someone, how are you doing today? And they say, I'm fine. And you're like, no, you're not. It's something like that, where it's like a feeling that you get that could be contrary to what's on the outside. So,
but how does that feel? Because when we say clear feeling, what does it feel like? How do we pinpoint that feeling? Do you get a gut reaction? Do you get a physical sensation? Do you have an emotion? Are you aware of what's really going on in their life? So when you talk about that difference,
yeah, I don't know, because
how do you identify that?
It could be a knowing. That's why I think cognizance, sentience, and being an empath, those are like real blended, because
they are. It's very difficult to break those out. I completely agree. Yeah.
Because to me, it's like the same idea about the small talk, where it's like, you could be saying one thing, but feeling something else. And is that a knowing on my part or a feeling? Not really sure.
And you're right. And I think sometimes two people can really pick apart the psychic senses, and you don't want to do that because it all kind of bombards you in a variety of different ways. Ultimately, you want to trust that when you're getting it. Like you said, if somebody says to you they're fine, but you get this rush wherever it comes from that it's something isn't, then you probably should listen. But it's just to kind of help people, especially who are beginning, to kind of identify. And I think when we talk about clairsentience, you're right. People say, oh, well, I'm an empath. And I'm like, okay, but what does that mean? Because what's empathic for you is different for this person who's empathic. It's the same thing as saying, what's channeling? Well, I channel a spirit, but I channel animals, or I channel the Akashic field. So I think empathic is very much, for me, just a terminology that says it's a degree of sensitivity. That's how I define an empath. It's a degree of sensitivity. I utilize clairsentience very much so, but I don't consider myself empathic. So for me, that border of being empathic is when it happens to you without your consent. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay. So because I have clairsentience, so am I empathic? Well, I guess so, but ultimately not really, because I'm able to keep it out. I have enough boundaries and I have the ability to push that away that I wouldn't define myself as an empath.
Everyone should have a degree of empathy, right?
Yeah, but empathy is not the same as being empathic. That's different. Oh, okay. Empathy and empathic I can have empathy for you, but that's not the same. Empathy is an emotion that we generate to be considerate of someone else, right? We are empathetic to their situation. An empath is a psychic process. Empathy is not psychic.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Makes sense. Empathy is not psychic. It's simply me having compassion for your situation.
Right.
So that is generated from my ability to be empathetic to your situation. It's a degree of compassion. Being empathic is a psychic process that most empaths say it happens to them so much that it's like they have to learn how to control it. That to me is what an empath is. It's a high degree of clairsentience. And as they become more trained, they're able to turn it off, control it, turn it off, turn it on. Does that?
Yep. That makes sense. I mean, if you're an empath, it's kind of uncontrollable. You get bombarded a lot. And until you can really figure out and separate what your feelings are from what somebody else's are, then you're going to have a hard time dealing with like the intensity. It's like an intensity about it.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
Yeah. And so I think you're right. I mean, being an empath and being clairsentient really are kind of the same thing. It's because an empath says, I absorb everything. And generally what you're absorbing from the other person is their feelings, their emotions, what's going on in their life. And it can also happen at the body level, the physical level. I'm taking on the illnesses or the pains of others. That is utilizing clairsentience. But the term empath means that it's overlaying itself on someone so heavily that they're no longer discerning between themselves or the other. Okay.
Right. So when you get like a physical ailment from someone and you're like, man, does your back hurt? Because mine does now all of a sudden, that's like an empathic, but
that would be an
physical
empathic experience.
aspect.
Yes.
Right.
Now, if I just said to you, oh, your back is hurting you, that's not an empathic experience, because I could be getting that through claircognizance, or I could just be making note of it. That doesn't mean my back is hurting as well. That simply means I am aware that your back is hurting.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like well, because like I've done that before where I've like absorbed the pain and then been like, damn, like, or even like after someone's left and been like, ow, So it's like weird.
But you're having the physical experience. You are having the physical experience. You're having the emotional experience. So here's another good example. Spirit shows up in a mediumship reading and they're sad, and I start crying because I cannot control. Now that doesn't happen very often for me, but you have this
to me ridiculous amount of times.
Exactly. So that would be what I would consider the empath. The experience has moved onto you to the point that it becomes you. You can't detach from that.
Yes.
And so it's a degree, right?
Which is, and I hate crying. So
I try not to do it either. They say it's not the most professional thing to do. Unfortunately, sometimes it happens.
What happens? Yeah, I can't. Oh my God, so many times I've just been like burst into tears, and I don't know how to make it stop necessarily, unless, it's like, unless you really do, you have to back off the energy and just be like, whoa, that's too much.
Right. Yeah, you have to kind of get control of that. And I think that that's, again, when we're talking about an empath, that control aspect is generally very difficult because they're so absorbent, right?
Right.
Like they're a paper towel or a sponge. They're taking all of that in. We consider them highly sensitive persons as well. So you'll hear the term empath and highly sensitive person being used at the same time. So this is a good discussion, and I did want to get into it because empathic falls into the category of clairsentience. But I utilize clairsentience, and I don't consider myself an empath because I do not have that degree of absorption in the terms of when it happens to me, I can push it back away. So I am basically closing all of that off, whereas empaths feel like they just don't have that control, or they've had to learn that control.
Yes.
So that they can live. So have you done a good job, where you would say, since you consider yourself empathic, in finding ways of pushing those things out?
It's taken a lot of discernment practice and personal, I guess, shadow work and stuff like that. Because if you don't have your own issues in line, anytime someone else's stuff comes up into your sphere, it makes it just magnified, like so bad. So one of the things that I had to do is really step aside from my trigger reactions to things. Was that, I have to question it. Where did it come from? Was that because of I was already feeling that way? Or is that because this person just stepped into the room and now all of a sudden I'm like, different. So there's that. What else? I think it's, if you have to master your own energy first. So when you know what you feel like, you're aware of your own moods, you are in your little bubble of energy, that's when you can recognize when something new comes in, and you can be like, oh, these aren't mine. And then at least and so you can deal with it.
Right. Nope. You hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. It's that awareness factor again. And we talked about that in both hearing and seeing as well. It's like, you have to be self-aware. And that's really the key to being psychic. We can talk about all these senses all day long, but if you're not aware of what you're thinking, seeing, feeling, what your body's doing, if you're just running through life, all of the psychic senses are going to get missed. So that's
Right.
very true. But there are people who are
Right.
aware that they're being bombarded from others at that empathic level. They say, okay, well, I know that this is coming from someone else. I'm aware now. So the next step becomes, how do you push that away? How do you create that boundary? And I know that some of this is going to be things that we talk about when we get to the psychic self-defense, because in many ways, empaths need to understand self-defense techniques, because they do need to push that emotion and stuff out. So
It's kind
what
of a
were some
shielding.
strategies? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of a shielding. I used to do door-to-door sales, so I would have to constantly come up to different people that have different energy, and it would take a lot for me to like separate like each one, like not take the asshole from the last house to the next house, and try to get rid of that energy. Otherwise, it just ruins your whole day, right? And
Right.
anybody that works in customer service will know people can either make or break your day if you let them. So the idea is that you kind of have to put up this shield and say, look, I know what exists in my field. I don't know what's existing in
Right.
your field,
Right.
but whatever is happening in your world, I send you love and light. Just, it's kind of just this like pushback
Not taking
of,
ownership, right? You
right.
can't take the
So anything
ownership
that
of it.
that person says that's negative, that's like, oh, well, blah, 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 whatever they say that's bad, you're not going to take it personal. You're not going to own their negativity. You're going to be like, no, that's yours. Sorry. Have a nice day. Right. That's an example. It takes practice. I don't think it's something that you can just tell somebody, oh yeah, just put up a shield. But it's like a mental, it's like a mental thing. You just kind of say, I have a shield,
right. Yeah.
Your negativity is not going to permeate my space. This is
right. Well, there's a lot to being empathic, and or people that have a very open type of system where everything gets in, and having to learn how to push that stuff out and create some boundaries. And we won't get into that today, because I think that's another topic, but we are talking about clairsentience, and empathic was a huge part of it. I mean, it just is a part of when you're talking about clairsentience. So as you can see, we've talked about emotions, impressions, and sensations. And so, unlike hearing and seeing, which happens in your mind, right? That all happens up in here. When it comes to clairsentience, it tends to be very, your emotions hit you more in the chest area. They hit you more here. You might feel socked in the gut, or when you're angry, it's like, your throat kind of starts to clench, and you've got a lump in your throat, or your anxiety, your chest starts beating. So clairsentience, and many people, especially I've been to mediumship workshops and stuff where they want you to open up from the heart space first, because that's where clairsentience focuses. It comes more from this area down in here, because when we feel something, we don't feel it in our head. Right. If you have an emotion, you might think about it in your head, but you feel it kind of all through your body. Does that make sense? Am I saying that right? I mean, it's like,
yeah.
Because a feeling doesn't happen up here. That's not where feelings happen. Feelings happen here.
Right.
Here.
It's directly related to your heart chakra, I would say.
Or it can be your solar plexus.
So it would be your heart chakra, and then your solar plexus too, because like you were saying, it's like your gut feeling.
And your throat
definitely
chakra.
It's felt, it is felt throughout the body. So like if clairsentience is a feeling, or like a gut feeling, it's like, what, I have a gut feeling not to go into this alleyway, or I have a gut feeling not to take this bus, or whatever it is. But you might feel that in your gut as like okay, good example. I guess our like, haunted houses, scary buildings, or whatever. There's like a weird gut like drop feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's something in the pit of your stomach, or maybe your heart starts palpitating, or there's just
for me
feeling.
For me, it's like a super just heavy, like, man, you just swallowed a brick in your gut.
Right.
right?
And
Don't
that's
go
kind
in
of an
there.
impression. If you said to somebody, imagine swallowing a brick, and that's why I said clairsentience is not just an emotion or a sensation, but it's an impression. It's like, I swallowed a brick. That's an impression. I want people to think about that for a minute. Imagine
Yeah,
swallowing a brick. What does that feel like to you? You know,
right.
it's like
Makes you want to throw up.
you've got a heavy feeling. So that is
Yes.
clairsentience as well. It's not really an emotion. Swallowing a brick is not an emotion. You
No,
didn't
no.
literally swallow a brick, so your body isn't actually experiencing that, but it is kind of having this reaction to, yeah.
Right. Exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
hard to put words to clairsentience. And I think that that's also what makes clairsentience very complicated, because we talked about it in clairaudience and clairhearing, where I said clairsentience is really complicated. You
Mhm.
have to put words to something which is ineffable, which means ineffable means it defies words. Because if I said to you, I've never seen a cotton ball before, tell me what it feels like. Don't describe it to me. Don't tell me that it's white and then it's round. What does a cotton ball feel like? What kind of words do
Soft,
you have to use? Soft, okay.
squishy,
Squishy, very good. That was one. Yeah.
uh,
Light,
fluffy.
airy, fluffy, small,
Mm,
right?
right.
So those are all words that have to describe a feeling. If you imagine holding a cotton ball right now, you know that it's a cotton ball, but are you really identifying with all of those feelings? And that's what clairsentience is. And then you have to put words to those. So
Right.
that's the part when spirit connects with you. It's like you're getting all of these feelings now, and you have to try to put words to that. Or you walk into a building and it has a feeling. You have to put words to those things so that people will understand them, because you know how it feels, but then you have to
Right.
verbalize that to the person that you're giving that information to. And that can be really tough to do.
Yeah. 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 Because again, when we're talking about the knowing too, it's like, oh, it kind of comes across like a feeling like I know I left my keys, on the table. Like is that a feeling or a knowing? It's like I feel like I know that,
Yeah, I see where that confusion is. And that was, when we talk about claircognizance, it's really tough to know. It's like, do we really know it? Or is there something that we felt first that led to the knowing? Or did we know it and that leads to a feeling? And I think you're right. Those
Right.
are really convoluted. Yeah.
Right. And then I wonder, well, because everything is usually coupled with something else, right? So
Right. Right.
that could just be that, and as far as I know, clairsentience is like the number one psychic mode or psychic clair. That's pretty common for most people to have.
Honestly, I would agree with you. We talked about clairvoyance and clairaudience, and but honestly, I think clairsentience is the number one.
Yeah.
And I would back that up by saying that there's a great resource which is called the Heart Math Institute. And what's really interesting is that the heart actually has more ganglia and neurons than your brain does.
Oh, right. The three brains. You have your heart, your
Body and your
brain, your
mind.
heart, and your stomach.
Oh, your stomach. Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Okay.
the gut. It's the gut that we're talking
Gut.
about.
Gut.
Your gut
You're right. It
feeling.
absolutely does. But the interesting part is that the heart is extremely intelligent. And that is where, and the gut too, you're right. And so that's where all this clairsentience is coming from. It creates its
Right.
own electromagnetic field. And we know that psychic information, haunting is electromagnetic recording, psychic information, electromagnetics. So
Right.
this is all coming from your heart space. But when people are getting these psychic hits, they don't come with words or visuals. They just comes with feelings and impressions, and you're not sure where they're coming from. And so you think they're yours, right? You think, oh, I'm mad, and then I'm happy, and then I'm sad, and now my ankle hurts, but I didn't do anything to hurt my ankle. And now I want to vomit, and now this, and now that. And you're all over the place. And
Right.
so those are signs, like you said, to kind of slow down and really evaluate, okay, wait a minute. Is this all you? Are you picking up on the collective? Are you picking up on your family members? And so those things can be really hard to discern, right? Because how do you know
Right.
they're not you? How did you figure those things out? Did that come
Um,
all back to that awareness again, that self-work?
yeah, like, well, how did I figure that out? Well, yeah, because it was like, I don't know. I've never really had anxiety attacks. Like I've never had like a full-on panic attack before. And I was like, I was starting to like have these like panic modes, and I'm like, what is happening? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I figured out how to ground out of it. That was one thing.
Well, where were they
Um,
coming from? Were you able to finally identify the
yeah, it
source?
was coming from the collective.
Okay.
That's how I realized I was being more than influenced by the collective, and I needed to get out of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, it was an awareness that this energy, this anxiety, this angst, whatever it was, is not mine. I'm fine, right? This is
Right.
not mine. So why am I feeling like I'm bombarded with all of this energy? And then when I did try to ground and meditate out of it, it helped. And so one of the things, and so I kind of just had this realization, I guess, that this is the collective, and this is not my energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I just kind of learned how to transmute it and send
But
it
being
back.
aware is huge, right? I mean, just being aware of it was the first step, recognizing, oh, wait a minute,
It really was.
I'm not feeling anxious. Why am I having an anxiety attack? It's really stepping back and evaluating what's happening and saying, is this really me? Now, I know that can be tough,
Right.
especially if people are taking on sensations, because we talked about emotions and impressions, right? So an anxiety attack is kind of, it's an emotion slash impression and a sensation, right? Because your
Right.
body's responding. But let's say you're having a lot of nausea all of a sudden, right? And it comes only when you're around certain people. So you might want to look at that and go, gee, maybe I'm not really sick, because
Yeah.
when we have
Mm-hmm.
nausea, we first thing we think is I'm sick.
Right.
Okay. And we certainly need to look at that. There could be something physically wrong with the body. But if you're feeling perfectly fine and that nausea comes and goes, and maybe it's only happening with a certain person or at a certain time or in certain circumstances, that nausea may be some type of a psychic hit for you, or some type of clairsentience that's coming from someone else. And that's
Right.
what you mean by, I think we have to step back and we have to take a look at that, and we have to say, is this really my nausea, which would be a sensation? Is this really mine? Is there some illness, something my body is telling me
Right.
I need to pay attention to health wise? Or is this a psychic, energetic overlap that's coming from someone or something else? That is really, really tough to discern. And I have to be honest. And that's what makes empath and clairsentience really, really hard.
Well, that's how I discovered my mantra of any negative energies that are not mine, I acknowledge, transmute, and send back to source, because that is what saved my life.
So kind of having some
um,
self-protection mechanisms, because people kind of poo-poo that. And I know that you and I have learned not to poo-poo, but those types of defense strategies can be helpful in just keeping certain things away so that you can be more clear.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, awareness is number one. And especially with being an empath, I think the biggest thing is just not dismissing this kind of stuff. You know, it's like when you start to get these signals and you start to figure it out, that's where you need to just start to embrace. And the more you experience, the more you learn how to discern, and then the better you get at it, and then the more efficient you become. And that's the whole point.
Right.
So
I agree. And looking for patterns, because, we talked about emotions and impressions, but I also said sensations. I mean, here's another one. People, like, for example, they get tingling, or they will say, oh, the hair on my arms are raising, or my ears are ringing. And sometimes people will
right.
associate those with particular types of mediumship experiences. And they start to put two and two together, where either the ears are ringing, or they've got pressure on one side of their head, or again, like I said,
Correlation.
that right, put some correlation to some of your experiences. And so that's why working with spirit, working with sitters, utilizing your skills and getting feedback for those helps you learn your psychic hits. And that's true for the physical stuff, right? You know, we talk about your symbology when you're seeing, but when you have physical sensations, they may cue you into something that you need to know. And you have to practice working with those. Then if they happen and you're out in public, you can go, oh, that's really interesting. That's my sign for this. You don't take it as your illness. You can go, I wonder where that's coming from. And then you can get back and kind of be a little bit more objective about it. Does that make sense the way I'm explaining that?
Yeah, I also would say that that's kind of like, the physical stuff like goosebumps that can be taken many ways. For example, like
well, sure, it's different to everybody, right? Go ahead.
So when you're in a mediumship session with someone and you get goosebumps, it's like confirmation, right? It's like confirmation that this energy or spirit is here. And that can happen in a psychic hit too, where all of a sudden you're kind of channeling this information, you get goosebumps as like a confirmation. So
most people have told me that that's what it is for them. I have never gotten goosebumps. So I cannot, never, not
even on all your investigations or
no, never, not once. Never, but everyone that I've talked to is, has said, oh, I'm getting goosebumps and that means a positive confirmation for them. So I haven't heard anybody say it means anything different. I just still want people to be careful as far as their interpretation.
Goosebumps are crazy. Like, because when like a spirit is around, sometimes it's like head to toe goosebumps, bam, like, something is there. There's no question about it. So that's like, I don't know, is that knowing? Is that feeling,
Well, a goosebump is a sensation. It's physically happening to your body. That's what a goosebump
right, but
would
does
be
that
what
fall
I would call
under, that's what I'm saying though, does that fall under clairsentience or does that fall under claircognizance?
Well, you had the goosebump first, and then you told yourself that's my sign for the presence of spirit. So, or
confirmation, or it can be confirmation.
No, that's definitely clairsentience, but it's happening in the body. It's not an emotion or an impression. It's a sensation. Makes sense?
Yeah.
At least that's the way I would describe it. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm just saying, pay attention to those sensations in the body as well, because they do have meaning. I know, for example, if I'm doing a session with a sitter, and I get a pain down in my uterus area, right? That denotes something's going on that's female related for that particular sitter. So I just kind of get this little, and it's not like pain, like as in it's sharp, but I just get this awareness that there's like this thud kind of going on down there. Okay. There's a sensation that pulls my awareness into that space that says, oh, something's going on there. And then as soon as I identify it, it disappears. And that's the other thing too, for people to pay attention to, is if you're not super empathic, because I'm going to put a condition on that. For me, once I identify what it is and where it belongs, it just goes away, because I've already pointed out and identified what needed to be said. And then I just move on, and it doesn't stay with me. Here's again where the empath, they will identify it, but it is they're so connected to it that it sticks with them, and they have to learn how to move. It lingers. It lingers. And that can happen for some empaths when they're doing energy work with their sitters or connecting with a spirit. They've got those lingering effects that overlap. That, again, to me, is what defines an empath. You can be empathic and be in control, or be empathic and not be in control. But that, again, another topic. But I just want people to be clear on some of that terminology and what happens there.
Definitely. Muy importante.
So I think we've kind of highlighted here what clairsentience looks and feels like. I think we've talked about it enough that people should have a pretty good idea that it's very diverse and because it's so
Yes.
complicated. You could have a little twitch on your toe or the bottom of your feet that goes, oh, you must have problems with your feet because you're having problems with my feet. And then the next thing you know, it's like your lungs are tight, you can't breathe. And then all of a sudden you're sad, or you feel like there's a weight on your shoulders. These again are all forms of clairsentience. They have interpretive qualities to them that are connected to the emotions and to the body. And so that makes clairsentience a massive but extremely vital psychic sense. And I think that is, you're right. I think ultimately that is primary for just about every psychic, whether they know it or not.
Right. Yes. Yes. This is
I
why
do.
everyone says trust your intuition, trust your gut.
Trust your instincts, trust your
Yeah.
emotions and your feelings. Not to say that our emotions and feelings can't lead us astray, right?
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's something else which I'm probably jumping ahead to, is we do need to be careful that we also don't go to the opposite direction and say, well, I'm getting nausea and that's just my sign for being sick. And so that person's making me sick, or, oh, that person's sad, so I'm sad today. Because sometimes people think they're empathic and they'll blame other people for their own personal emotions and illnesses. And that's where you talked about the shadow work and knowing yourself. No, you might really
Yeah.
be sick. It might be yours. You might really be angry. You might
Right.
really be bringing some trauma to the surface that needs to be addressed. And
Well,
displacing
one thing
that
that I
onto another
noticed is,
person.
yeah, okay, so if you don't have your own traumas figured out, if someone else's traumas come into your little energy field, it's going to be that much worse. It's
It can
like
trigger.
times
That's right. It can
10.
trigger.
Yeah. So it's hard enough to deal with my own crap. I don't need to deal with other people's too. But once you dealt with your own, then it's like now you can deal with other people's.
But some
But
people will use that as a crutch not to deal with their own, because they will say, oh, that's her trauma. That's not mine. I'm like,
right.
so you know what I mean? It's like, or
But it is. You still
yeah,
have to recognize it. You still have to say,
right,
not my circus, not my monkeys today. So
right. I think it's
there's a
just like
fine
a
line.
fine line, because there have been not often, but there have been some occasions where I have worked with people maybe that have contacted, for investigation work, and they're like, well, I'm just empathic, and this is going on, and that's going on, and this is going on, and that's going on, and they're blaming it on this spirit, and they're blaming it on this person. So there's a lot of blame going on for everything that's happening in their life, and there's
Mhm.
zero accountability.
Right.
And so at that point, I start questioning how much of this is psychic, not to say that it's not psychic impressions, but how much is psychic and how much is it of the person blaming their own personal stuff on outside sources
I think a
that
lot of people
may
do
not
that.
be to blame at all.
I know. I think a lot of people do that with a lot of different things. Let's
We
be
all do. We're
honest.
all guilty
Right.
of it. Yes.
I
But
think the
it's
important thing to
being aware
remember,
of that.
right? I think the important thing to remember if you're empathic is that it's not a handicap. It's not. People are like, oh, I'm empathic, so it hurts me, and man, it's not.
So, in other words, don't be a victim empath.
There you go. There you go. So it's more like, no, I'm an empath, so you better not lie because I know exactly what you're actually saying, even though you're not saying it.
Yeah.
That's power. That's not a victim mentality. This is a gift, even though you have to cultivate it into such a way so that it doesn't
Right.
bombard you.
Right.
But I'm certainly not going to let other people's stuff just weigh me down and then be like, it's
Right.
because I'm empathic. Don't
Or
do
you're
that.
not empathic at all, and you're just using your own stuff as an excuse to blame it on other people. So
Right.
again, if someone has zero accountability though, and that's probably a whole nother topic for,
That could be a whole nother
that's a
show.
whole nother problem all in itself. And but you see people that say, well, this spirit is the cause of all my problems. And you and I have both gone in investigations where we walk in and we realize that the negative energy that's being perpetuated in the home is a result of living people. It is
Right.
not a result of spirit. And
Right.
regardless of how much we might say to them, look, you've been convinced and I've been convinced that this is coming as a result of the circumstances that are going on in the home. Some people are not going to accept that or buy into it. It's still a spirit in their mind. And
Right.
maybe it is, maybe we're wrong, right? We have to go there. It's tough to prove. So, but on the other hand, maybe it's just easier for them to blame that situation on an outside source than to do the change that is necessary to stop the negativity that they're creating. And that's another example of what I'm talking about, where sometimes we get into that victim mindset where we can use psychic experiences and blame it on some outside source rather than being accountable.
Right. And that's why shadow work, because that's a whole, do we have a done show on that yet? That's going to be a whole nother show.
No, yeah. You have to write down
how
all
many
these
shows
topics.
have we done? I don't even know, but
empaths, shadow work, victim empath, but
yeah, because that's important though. Like you're saying, don't.
Well, you often hear people say that being psychic or walking the spiritual path is actually all about personal growth. And this is a huge part of it. I have had to become so much more self-aware in order to be psychic, because you have to separate what's yours and what's not.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the other thing that I want to talk about with clairsentience that I'll touch on just a little bit is we talk about picking up the emotions of others, and we talk about picking up maybe the physical pains of others. But then comes this other complicated aspect of when we say, I'm aware of the energy, because we all have energy, right? And we all have an energy body. We have a physical body, and then we have an energy body. And so empaths are also very sensitive to the other people's energy, not just their emotions and their physical pains, but their energy. And that's another aspect that's really hard to describe. So I want to give an example of go ahead. You got an example of what energy feels like?
Because I'm actually I'm guilty of it a little bit, where it's like I'm kind of reserved by myself, right? Or like just, I don't know, chill, right? But when I go to, let's say, a party, I tend to take on the energy of the party, right? Whereas I can be super fun or whatever, I don't know, but I guess, does that make sense? So like if you go into a bar,
it's the vibe, it's
like
the
a
vibe.
bar, and let's say the bar, all of a sudden you walk in and you're like, yeah, this might have been the wrong bar to walk into. We should go back, or let's find a different place. Or you can walk into a bar and be like, this place is hopping, like, let's go, get some drinks and have some fun. So I think that kind of feeling energetically, empaths are really sensitive to that. So, but anybody could be sensitive to that. Like, is that clairsentience, or is that, empathic?
Same thing. I think the empath is probably a little more sensitive to it, but and probably more aware of it, but we're all sensitive to that. That's that collective energy again. We're all susceptible to that. We're all being hit with it, whether we're aware of it or not. That's a good example. You're talking about collective energy and collective emotion. You think about, the Global Consciousness Project, where they were measuring, the spike in feelings and emotions that happens at sporting events or after disasters. Those all have, but those are emotions or feelings. I think when I was talking about energy, is people feel people's personal energy. So I might be happy but my personal
Yes,
energy
definitely.
is still a certain way. So let me give you an example. That person's energy is very solid. They're solid. They're a solid person. Their energy moves really quick, very
Right.
fast. It's very fluid. Um, it's very bright. It's very light. It's in motion. It's big. Your energy's big. You've got a big energy, right? So I'm not talking about who you are and your personality. I'm talking about your energy field. What, because we have an energy field. And again, that is a huge
Right.
part for people that are clairsentients. They will often say, well, I want to describe what your energy is like. And that can be very different from your personality, right? Because your personality might be one way
True.
and your energy might be something very different. I remember one time a lady was connecting with me and I was trying to feel what her energy was like because she was having a lot of different issues. And I remember describing her energy field as being porous. It reminded me of craters on a moon. And that, I mean, that was kind of
Huh.
the feeling that I had gotten. And I said, your energy shield, your energy bubble, right, is very porous. And I said, you've been bombarded with all of these different things that have been going on in your life, and they've hit your energy shield, and you will let them all come in. So her energy felt very porous and very brittle, and she identified with a lot of the other things that I said that I won't talk about here because they're semi-personal, but she was able to understand all of that. So
Hmm.
when we're talking about describing someone's energy field, that often also comes in the form of clairsentience. Unless you're seeing the energy field, the only other way you know what a person's energy is like is through feeling it,
True. I
through
understand what you're
blending
saying.
with
Yeah.
it, through coming with it. A spirit
Right.
is only energy. So the only way you're going to feel that spirit is
That
to
works a lot in
feel their
mediumship for
energy.
sure.
It is
Yeah.
definitely key in mediumship. And you will
Yeah.
hear mediums that say, well, I know the spirit's here because I feel the presence, I feel the energy. So I recognize certain spirits because they have an energetic signature. An energetic signature, right? It's like your face. Your face is your physical signature, but you have an energetic signature as well. Now, spirit is no longer
Right.
living, so it's lost its physical signature. It can describe itself, and we can say, I had brown hair, brown eyes. I was 5'7" and, female, but there's still an energetic signature that you can feel, and that's all clairsentience. So I just wanted to add that
Right.
in
That
there,
makes sense.
that energy part, because we talk about feelings, we talk about impressions, we talk about physical sensations, but we have to also remember people have energy as well. And so that becomes another something that we can perceive. Is that even more confusing, or does that make sense what I'm describing?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. But I definitely think that that was, or it would be most important in mediumship, what you're talking about,
Mhm.
because I understand, you know, describing people like that, where, you coming across them and you get this feeling of grandma, or this feeling of warm and fuzzy, and it's usually felt in your heart chakra.
And
Um,
yeah, warm and fuzzy is kind of an
you know,
impression, but it's almost like let's say you've connected with that spirit before, like your dad, right? When your dad comes forward, the only reason I know your dad is here is because his energetic signature shows up and I feel it. I have no
right.
description for it. I can put no words to it because it is his and his alone.
Right. Well, once you get an idea of people's energy signatures, then it does become a lot easier to reconnect.
It's very
So,
automatic. Mhm.
but when it's new and you haven't experienced it yet, then that's like an exploring, because but when it's already known, they can just come right back. Boom, 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 and you know who they are. So,
Exactly. Right. Yeah. But that's just another one of those examples of clairsentience, in the fact that it is that little quick energetic signature that really just it's not an emotion. There's no sensation to it. There's no impression. It's almost just a knowing that I feel that energy. I feel it. There it
yeah.
is. Boom. And so it's just another one of those confusing aspects to clairsentience. So,
Right.
so as we've done with the other two clairs, what do you feel that some of the benefits of clairsentience are? Because,
Well, like I said, it's kind of this idea of being able to feel out. It's like a truth detector, or being able to feel things out. Like I said, when people are like, "Oh, I'm fine,"
right, because people can say one thing, but
right?
they're
But are you really fine?
energetically or
Yeah.
emotionally, there's something really very, very different probably going on in the background. And that clairsentience can be very key to that. Right.
Right. So it's kind of this idea that I think it's a more naturally occurring thing than not, in fact, because we are always interacting with energy, and everything is energy. So I think the important thing is to recognize that it is happening. And I think any kind of downfall with that would just be to not be aware of it, because really we are interacting with stuff like this all the time, each other and whatnot.
And it's interesting how much we downplay our feelings and our gut instincts or our impressions. We often have gotten into this, especially in today's modern age with science and technology, and we're trusting our mind more than we're trusting our heart brain, right? Because remember, we've got that other intelligence system, which is the heart. And we've kind of become disconnected to that. And I think the other thing that's interesting is women are much more so connected with their emotions. So it makes sense that women can be more intuitive or more psychic because they're utilizing this aspect of themselves more, especially highly sensitive people. They're utilizing that clairsentience and learning to trust that kind of stuff. Right. I think one of the benefits that I thought about clairsentience is how much information is there. I mean, look at what we've talked about today. Right. I could talk about your energy. I could talk about what's going on with with your body by feeling what's happening with my body. So I can talk about a lot of health information. I can feel what your emotions really are, even though you're telling me one thing. I can really feel what you're really actually feeling. I can get impressions about things that may or may not be good for you by how it feels to me. To me, clairsentient is just loaded with information that sometimes can be very hard to get by either hearing or seeing. Yes. It's almost a clunkier process to me than the clairsentience is.
Right. Because again, I kind of feel like it blends with claircognizant or cognizance.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
The clear knowing, because it's like, how do you know? It's a feeling that you know. And again, all these things are usually coupled with other things. So it might be a feeling that you know, and you hear something like a word. The important thing, again, going back to just being aware of your own energy so that you can be aware of outside energy.
Paying attention to it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think it was just the fact that, clairsentience is very densely loaded with information. Again, many natural psychics talk about starting to open up your abilities by starting with the clairsentience, because they say that is, if it's such a powerful system, utilize that first. So that can be a benefit as well. It's an easy place to just say, start opening up from there. How do I feel?
Right.
What do you feel about this situation? What do you feel when you see this? What do you feel about that person? What do you feel when you see this picture? That is generally the first place that people will try to take you in your development. And if we can tap into that, one of the benefits is it's pretty easy to tell how you're feeling about something. You just have to be honest with yourself. What do you feel?
Yeah.
Don't create it. Just what do you feel? So.
Right.
And I think the last benefit too is it's just, and some of these really kind of overlap, but it's just an outstanding way to perceive emotional, mental, and physical the issues that people are dealing with. It really gives you that insight without having to wait to hear it or to see it. You just have this instantaneous almost knowing of what's going on with someone, if you can slow down enough to feel it and then put words to it. And I think that leads me to drawbacks, which we kind of already touched on. It's complicated. There's so much to clairsentience that sometimes you feel bombarded, right? So that's a drawback.
Yeah.
And then when you are feeling things, you may not know where it's or who it's coming from. So that can be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is you have to find your own vocabulary for describing it.
Right.
You know, if a spirit comes at you and they're angry, you can feel that anger right away, but you have to translate that to your sitter. Why are they angry? What's the anger about? You have to find that terminology so that you're not misconstruing what that anger was. So you have to find ways to, like the cotton ball. How do you describe what a cotton ball feels like? You have to find terminology. And I think that makes clairsentience very difficult to verbalize.
That's true. But I mean, you can tell the difference between someone who feels annoyed versus, super upset or something like that, like degrees
Sure.
of varying stuff like that. If that's what you're talking about, being able to describe the feeling, to give a more accurate picture of the energies that you're connecting with.
The other drawback that you mentioned is that it can be very difficult to discern what's you and what's someone else.
I think that is.
I'm like, was that where you were going?
Yeah. But I thought I had a better way to say it. Anyway.
You probably did, but yeah.
It's all good.
But it is difficult because if people we've talked about, that's the whole empath dilemma. It's like, right. Is it mine or is it someone else's? Yeah. And it's that discernment factor. Now we have to discern with hearing, right? We have to discern whether or not our thoughts are ours or they're coming psychically. We have to discern if the visual is just a daydream that we're creating, or if that visual has relevance psychically. So all of this really does boil down to awareness and discernment, which is just a part of the process.
Right.
So I want to move to talking about potential clues that you're clairsentient dominant, because we had talked about in the others. So this is like, how do people know if they're clairsentient dominant? First of all, I think if you're psychic, you're clairsentient.
Yeah.
You may not be in touch with it at some level, but honestly, that was not the first place where my psychic ability started. They actually started with my clairaudience because I was journaling and writing. So the clairsentience expanded over time. But for a majority of psychic people, I think the clairsentience, honestly, is truly kind of where the primary stuff goes. So if you're highly emotional, you're often considered overly sensitive, or you're told that you're too sensitive. If you're prone to empathy and you're very compassionate, or you're also very sensitive to negatively charged emotions, right? So you can become overreactive very, very quickly. So these are all clues that potentially, right, you could be clairsentient, okay? So take a look at that, because those emotions can be both positive and negative, right?
Yes.
If you're the type of person who makes decisions based on your emotions rather than your thoughts and logic, clairsentience is probably also very key for you. That means you trust your emotions for making decisions. Ergo, clairsentience is probably going to be a dominant or very prevalent for you. Okay.
Right.
You identify with or have been called empathic or empathetic, remembering that empathetic and empathic are different. You readily know how people feel, either physically or their moods, including strangers. Then you're probably clairsentient. You enjoy experiences and situations that invoke strong emotions, and these can stay with you for days. So again, loving how you feel after coming out of nature and how that rejuvenates you. You may not be aware of that, but that has some type of clairsentient effect upon you. So that again would be something for you to be aware that clairsentient is probably very dominant for you. Make sense? You also find it hard to shake emotions or separate from the pains and woes of others, or even the world and what's going on around you. That can also be key factors to clairsentient being very dominant for you. And you may also identify with the feelings or the essence of stones, animals, plants, etc. So it doesn't have to be human beings or collective. You're just sensitive to the energy of other things in general, regardless of what they are. Some people say they resonate with certain stones. They don't know why. They just get a feeling about it, or it has an impact on their body. This is all very clairsentient type of experiences. I do not connect with plants or animals or stones at any conscious level. I'm sure it's still happening, but I'm not aware of anything clairsentient wise. So, which again is why I think it's there and I utilize it, but it's not as strong in me as it is in some people. So those are all clues for people to say, oh, I am clairsentient dominant, or I may be clairsentient dominant. And so the last topic, and we've really talked about most of this, so I'm just going to touch base real quickly, is when and how to work with your clairsentience. First of all, know your own emotional and physical state, right? We've hammered that home, because you can't discern what's yours and what's someone else's if you don't know what first is yours. All right.
Exactly.
Practice feeling with your heart and chakra space, as well as expanding and or contracting this area to increase and decrease your connection. So if you imagine kind of, how does this person feel again? I want to connect with them. Imagine yourself connecting and moving out and caring about the person that's across from you. And then how do you feel when you connect with that person? So you can, but do that from, again, that heartfelt space. That is the clairsentience. Okay.
Right.
Another thing you can do is practice scanning your physical body for how it feels, so that you know what's normal for you and what's not, right? So it's a great meditation exercise to just take 5 minutes and start at your feet and work your way up slowly and gradually. How do my feet feel today? Do I have any pain? Do I have any tension? How are my knees? Oh, I have my left knee. It always tweaks. Okay. So if your left knee is tweaking all the time, that's yours, right? You've probably got a pain there.
Right.
Moving on up. Do you have indigestion? How does your body feel? Working with your own energy, working with your own body, becoming aware of what your norm is. That's a great meditation exercise where you're not just sitting and kind of zoning, but you're really focusing on scanning your body from top to bottom and getting a feel for what's normal for you.
Right, right.
And so
that's
then
really important.
When you're with someone else and something is happening, then you can go, oh, that's not my normal. And then that'll kind of clue you in, either A, something new just happened to you, or you were getting a hit. Okay.
Another signal for me when it's psychic is that it just it comes in waves. Like if it's an actual ailment that you have, it's not going to come in a wave and then go away. It's like it hurts. It's
generally persistent, it's like right? And it's day after day.
Pain.
That's exactly right. Right. Good point.
But when let's say I'm getting nauseous for no reason, and it's just kind of coming in these weird waves. If I stand there and ask spirit, hey, is this something spiritual or is this something physical? And it goes away, that's my sign that says it's spiritual. It's not anything else. And so I can just ground out of it. And usually that's enough. If it's because I ate, some shady gas station food, then right. It's not going to go away, and I'm just going to continue to have a stomach ache. So
yeah, right. Exactly. Great example. Right. Yeah. Another thing with clairsentience is make note of those sudden mood changes in mood or feeling, just like you were talking about earlier. If you've been happy all day and all of a sudden you feel like you want to murder someone, there's probably a reason for that, especially if there's no trigger. Right? It's like, oh my gosh, I was just happy. And I will do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was just happy. And now I'm just so aggravated. And I will stop and I will go, okay, why do I feel that way? Now, the first thing I do is I analyzed what I ate, because we are very reactive to foods. And that is a huge part of being aware of our bodies. Okay. Is we need to realize what we put in our bodies, because there are certain things that I will eat that will make me really, really angry. And sugar is one of them. I realize that when I eat sugar, it either depending on what I've eaten with it, I'll either get depressed or I'll get really angry. And so I've learned that. So you need to look at it, but at the same time, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't eat anything and I'm really mad. What is going on?
Hangry. That's me.
Well, not that I need to eat, but I'm
No,
just
I need
saying,
to eat.
if I've dismissed the fact that it's not a food related issue, right? Or whether I'm hungry or because I've eaten something, then I'll move to, is it a psychic reason? Is there a reason that I'm angry? Maybe my spouse is angry and it's bleeding onto me, because we are often highly connected to people that we're in
Right.
deep relationship with. I'll stop and I'll go, who's angry? Is something happening in the collective? The last thing that I will say is that I think that you need to utilize your psychic abilities with other people and get feedback. And that's true
Yes.
for any of the clairs, because if you're having an emotional feeling or you're getting goosebumps or you're feeling nausea, you need feedback. Without feedback, you're never going to know if what you're getting is real or not.
Right.
And I realize that that's scary. And we've talked about this, I think, before. You can still do it with people. You don't have to say, I'm a psychic and I think I'm getting this about you. If someone's feeling, like you gave the example, I'm fine. But if you get the feeling that they're not fine and they're really sad, you don't have to say, oh, I'm psychic and I'm getting this. But you can say, you say you're fine, but I get the feeling that maybe there's really something going on. Are you sad? Are you okay? And if they
Right.
start opening up to you at that point, they've kind of given you some feedback. So just remember to use your psychic abilities with other people, get feedback that will help you to discern the clairsentience a little bit more, to start being able to understand what you're getting about people physically, with your body sensations and with your emotions, and that will really clarify things. So I don't know if we did clairsentience justice or not, but it was again, it's kind of confusing. There's a lot of aspects to it, but I hope we've kind of clarified that and explained that for everybody and highlighted some things that will make you go, oh, I never thought about that before, or that's what that is, or that's what I need to do. So
Right.
any
Right.
last thoughts about clairsentience before we wrap it up?
No, I think we covered it.
Gotcha. Okay. I
Yeah.
always like to make sure you've got that chance to say something.
I appreciate that, Carol.
And
I
I'm not,
do.
because I dominate the conversation.
It's all good. So no.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us for Clairsentience. The last episode is going to be very quick and very brief. But we're going to talk about claircognizance and tasting and smelling, and we'll touch on that a little bit. So as always, please please subscribe. We thank you for watching. And if you need any contact information, it's down below. So we'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on Psychic Perspectives.